Good morning, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. So happy to have some time with you this morning. It's Wednesday, for those of you who need to know that. We are grateful for YWTV. It always creates an opportunity for us to stay engaged and connected and inspired on issues that we need to be connected to. And today is no different, a wonderful conversation, an important conversation that we'll be having. It is back to school. And back to school is looking a little bit different than it did when we started last year, although we are a little familiar with the territory we're in now because we have been living in this new normal for the last few months. Back to school for college campuses is looking a little different depending on what campus you're returning to, but almost all campuses are having some hybrid version of virtual learning and possibly some on-site. So that means, how do we operate with that when it comes to an important issue that we talk about every year at this time, which is campus sexual violence. And as you all know, this is an important issue for the YWCA of Northern New Jersey because of our healingSPACE program, which is the Sexual Violence Resource Center for Bergen County. This is an issue we're very committed to and have been very engaged with all of the institutions of higher education in Bergen County for many years. To try to educate students, keep faculty members connected, and let parents and the community know the issues that they should be looking out for. So with all of that, we thought it was important to talk about how virtual learning plays into this conversation, because some might think that it's not an issue when we're living in a virtual world. And that actually couldn't be further from the truth. And so we wanted to make sure that we were talking a little bit about that with you today. And so with that, I have three wonderful speakers to join us today. Before we jump into that, I want to just tell you a little bit about campus sexual violence and some statistics around it. Women ages 18 to 24 are at an elevated risk of sexual violence. It is more prevalent at college compared to other crimes. About 1 in 6 college-age female survivors received assistance from a victim service agency. Sexual violence may occur at a higher rate at certain times of the year, and more than 50% of college sexual assaults occur very early in the semester, August, September, October, or November. Students are definitely at an increased risk during the first few months of their first and second semesters in college. And again, online sexual harassment is a very real and great concern and a growing issue for sure with all of these virtual platforms for learning. YWCA's healingSPACE is, as I said, committed to sexual violence and education in our community. And with that, we were very fortunate for the last 2 years and now going into our third to be supported by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation and the IOLTA Fund to provide training on Title IX and the Clery Act to our institutions of higher education in our community. And this conversation is a extension of that. So with that, we are proud to have with us who's been part of those Title IX trainings. I'm going to introduce you to our panelists here, but I'll start with founder of Forensic Risk Management Group, Joseph Del Russo, who is an attorney and former chief assistant prosecutor with the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office in Paterson. He was a past member of the Protection Subcommittee of the New Jersey Governor's Task Force on Child Abuse and Neglect. He also was invited to participate in the Attorney General's working group, where he helped draft the sex offender risk assessment scale used in Megan's Law cases. He is presently a professor at Montclair State University's Robert D. McCormick Center for Child Advocacy and Policy, and he is the co-founder of Forensic Risk Management Group, a consulting firm that provides crisis management, investigations, fact-finding, and recommendations for minimizing institutional risk in sexual harassment, intimidation, bullying, child protection, and sexual violence cases. He is also of counsel in Clifton, New Jersey, at the firm of Matthew T. Priori Esquire, where he practices law part-time. We also have joining us today Saimaza Zedek. She is our very new, about a month in, healingSPACE program director. We're so excited to have her as part of our team. She is a dedicated social justice advocate who is committed to gender and sexuality, equity, diversity, racial justice, and violence prevention efforts. Prior to her role at healingSPACE, Saimaza served as the coordinator for the Women's Center and the LGBTQ plus services at Ramapo College of New Jersey, and coordinator of the Center for Violence Prevention of Passaic County Community College. She has devoted her career to addressing power-based personal violence by developing primary prevention educational programs and managing a coordinated community response team and building partnerships for survivors of sexual and domestic violence. She also has a clinical mental health experience in crisis intervention, counseling, case management. She earned a BA in Women and Gender Studies with a minor in Social Justice from William Patterson University and a Master's of Social Work from Rutgers University. Woo, woo, me too. Okay, and last but not least, we have Danielle Addis, who is a prevention and education specialist with over 17 years of experience in the field. She started her career in health promotion. She served as the assistant director for Rutgers University's Newark Health Promotion Division for 10 years, and also served as the coordinator for their sexual assault program for 7 years. Currently, she serves as the prevention and education coordinator and the head of the Office for Violence Prevention at Ramapo College of New Jersey. She earned both her degrees from Rutgers University at Newark and a bachelor's, her BA in English and psychology, and her master's in public administration. So welcome. Wow, you guys are all so impressive. And I'm so glad to have this time to talk to you today. So, Saimaza, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about why virtual learning doesn't really take away the problem of sexual harassment.
So, as we know, sexual violence is a pervasive public health issue. Sexual harassment is a form of sexual violence, and it's a broad term that includes many of the unwelcome sexual attention. So, online sexual harassment does not involve any type of in-person interaction, and the harassing behaviors can happen on social media posts, sending unsolicited messages, pictures, emails of a sexually explicit nature via various messaging email platforms. Modern technology, while it's necessary in this COVID world that we're living in, makes it even more possible for students to experience sexual harassment. And the problem doesn't just go away because the students are not on campus. Some, will argue that it could even escalate the violence because the perpetrator doesn't have readily access to their to the victim. And one of the most common forms of online sexual harassment, which we're seeing a lot in the college space and in the high school space, is students posting and sending and circulating sexually explicit materials containing the victim or a likeness of the victim. And this is commonly referred to as revenge porn. And that has everlasting impacts on the survivor, from emotional effects, mental health effects, and physical effects. And the experience and impact of it's unique to the individual, and it can be both felt in the short term and in the long term. And the impacts are amplified because of the re-victimization, once the content is reshared online, and being in a virtual space, when you're on campus sometimes, and we talk about this in bullying, right? So they're like, okay, I can go home and it's safe. I don't have to worry about it any longer. However, with all these platforms, that we can access, while really helpful, makes it so much more easier for perpetrators to access their victims.
Right, you can't really get away. You can't get away from them as easily. Yeah. So, Joe, if you could take a moment to explain, in case our viewers do not, have a good basis of understanding for this, the Title IX and the Clery Act. Maybe give us a little synopsis of what they are and how that impacts dealing with sexual violence on college campuses and bullying and harassment, and then a little bit about how it is impacted with this online piece now.
Yeah, let me just draft off of what we were just talking about, and I'll address what you brought up, Helen, and right after that. If you think about sexual harassment and sexual violence, it's really about behavior and not about proximity, right? And that's, I think, what my colleague was suggesting a moment ago. And the world's changed significantly with the advent of social media, where children are plugged into their friends and peers 24/7, and where students are plugged into their friends and peers 24/7, and sometimes their professors. I was talking to a colleague of mine, and a young woman was sexually harassed at a university in the South by her professor online. So the locus, the place where people interact is different, but the behavior can be the same. So it is a bit naive, I guess is not the right word, but it doesn't understand the issue to suggest that this can't happen online or in a virtual world. One thing that is different, though, you don't have campus parties, you don't have the direct mixture of alcohol and students, which is a big contributor to some of the issues that we face in keeping campuses safe. So that dynamic's changed. Perhaps next year or soon we will look at the data and just see what the numbers are to the extent that they're reliable, and figure out exactly how things have changed and in what direction they changed. But clearly, the notion of sexual harassment being reduced, or some people have suggested it's not even an issue anymore, is just wrong. For all the reasons that were stated before and for what I just said. It's all about behavior, not so much proximity. Title IX and the Clery Act are two different initiatives, and one's an act of Congress. The Clery Act is part of an earlier act of Congress, but the Clery Act was passed in 1990, and that's basically about statistics and gathering information. Campuses in the United States and Puerto Rico are required to maintain good records and data about sexual violence. And when Congress passed it, it was primarily about data collection. And the idea was, if you have this data, you can know where the problems are, and you can have more information and more transparency, and you can address campus sexual violence. In 1998, the Clery Act was renamed after Jane Clary, who was a student who was killed in her dorm room. And she was killed in 1986, but her family had advocated for her for many years, and it was renamed. And there have been multiple amendments. Most recently, in 2013, it was amended in conjunction with VAWA, which is an acronym for the Violence Against Women Act. And in 2013, the Clery Act was expanded, and it is more significant now than just a statistic gathering obligation for schools. In fact, the schools, let's start by saying who's subject to the Clery Act. It's schools that get financial assistance, public or private. If you get financial assistance from the United States through the Department of Education, then you have to abide by the Clery Act. And of course, Title IX as well, and I'll address that very briefly in a moment. But so if you get that kind of assistance, you have to abide by it, and it's more than getting statistics now. It requires programs like healingSPACE now, or their equivalent on campuses. You have to have campus programs which address dating violence, interpersonal violence, sexual violence. There has to be a process for students to get remedies and to file complaints and to have their safety issues addressed. So that's a change now, right? If it was just about how many people are assaulted and how many people are assaulted on a Monday or a Tuesday, that's one thing. But now there are affirmative requirements for schools as of 2013 and beyond. And some of you, I think it's called the Rave Alert, and that's just one format in which alerts are given on campus. I think that's what they call it. I know that comes from the courts. In any event, the campus police, if you have a campus police department, have to send out notifications about dangerous situations. And as a professor at Montclair State for many years, I started getting them about 5 or 6 years ago. Whenever something's going on, you get one of these Rave Alerts too. The other thing that the amended Clery Act says is that campus police have to publish the daily log of incidents that occur on campus. So it's a broad-based, it's far more broad than it was in 1990 when it passed. And it works in conjunction with Title IX and the Violence Against Women Act. And what Clery says is, among other things, as I just suggested, that you have to have a process for students who may have been impacted by sexual violence. You have to have some kind of process where they're able to be heard, whether they can get an outcome that makes them safer and justice, if you will. And there has to be a standard of proof. But now you asked about Title IX. Title IX, no pun intended, Title IX trumps the Violence Against Women Act and the Clery Act. Not so much trumps it, but it establishes what you have to do. And the Clery Act says you have to do that is, have a process for investigating and adjudicating sexual violence and interpersonal violence on campus. Title IX is the blueprint for how to do that. So Title IX governs how this process will occur. And Title IX, as many people know, was recently the regulations that Title IX is 3 sentences, you know, in the congressional laws. But the regulations that say how to implement Title IX, which is primarily about gender discrimination in schools and institutions of higher learning, and it does apply to high schools as well. So Title IX says what you have to do when there's a complaint, what the burden of proof is, how to do that, and there are changes that are happening, I think, in 2 days that have to be followed.
Right, and we'll get to those in a minute,
yeah.
Joe. So Mary, you're doing this work. I mean, so can you tell us a little bit about what this looks like, you know, making this come to life on a college campus? And also, how does it change now with virtual learning? And these virtual challenges that both Saimaza and Joe just shared with us, because it's obviously a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. It's extremely different. You know, the show must go on, right? We still have to service our students and give them the resources that they deserve as individuals. So it doesn't change the fact that we have to give them services and that we want to give them the services that are out there for them. At Ramapo College, we make sure that students are able to get all services as long as they're able to remotely, right? So even if it's health services or counseling services, we have created remote modules for them to be able to connect with a counselor. You still can, you know, report a sexual assault remotely. You can do it online. There's still investigations going on. So the show is still going on. It does pose some difficulty because one thing that is different is that you can't just walk into an office and say, I was a victim of sexual violence, or say I have a friend who was a victim of sexual violence, can you help me? So that has changed a little bit, but there are measures at our college for you to report a sexual violence act has occurred to you. Has it been made more challenging? Yes, but I think we've been able to step up to the challenge. All of our websites, for the most part, have a link to where you can get services related to being a victim of sexual violence. Having healingSPACE as a partner has really helped that. And one of the things that we've done recently, because we acknowledge that not everyone lives in Bergen County, so we make sure that our students have access to rape crisis centers throughout the state of New Jersey. And even if someone is somewhere outside of New Jersey, they can email me or email our Title IX department, and we can help them with that as well. Again, on all our websites, they have links to all of these things. So I think we're working on it, and most colleges and my colleagues in this position are doing the same. So students do have a place to go. It doesn't, you know, change the fact that we are there for them and still are supporting them.
Well, that's good to know, Marie, and we'll be putting links here in the comments so that if you are a student at Ramapo, you know how to get to Marie and her services, and also for healingSPACE. Joe, can you talk us through the changes that are coming on August 14th with Title IX and Clery Act under the Department of Education changes, and how that will impact students on college campuses from your perspective? And then I'd like to hear from Saimaza and Marie also about their thoughts about the impact.
Sure, I'll address them, but let me start from what I suggested before, that Title IX is a couple of sentences in the statutes of the United States. And in order for those statutes to govern policy and procedures on college campuses and high school campuses, for that matter, there have to be what we call regulations. And the Department of Education issues those regulations, and they have over the many years. It's very common among in the law. So in 2011, the Obama administration issued something called a Dear Colleague letter. And that Dear Colleague letter was designed to make sure that there was a professional response for people who may have been victimized by interpersonal or sexual violence or sexual harassment on campus. And it laid out a number of different processes that they felt were important. And the reason why the Obama administration can issue that letter and the Department of Education could enforce it is because all these schools accept federal funding. So you have to do what the government tells you to do, otherwise you don't get the federal funding, and everybody does it. And institutions tried their best to comply, and they were sincere about it, and they continued doing it. Well, recently, before there was a Trump administration, the courts of the United States of America began getting cases that arose from allegations of sexual harassment and gender discrimination, primarily with male accuseds and women complainants. And the question was, should there be due process that we have typically in the civil courts and the criminal courts in these kinds of proceedings? And for an attorney who ever walked into a proceeding in the past, it wouldn't look anything like a civil court, and it wouldn't look anything like a criminal court. You weren't entitled to an attorney. You weren't entitled to cross-examine. The accused wasn't entitled to full information, at least immediately. There were a lot of major differences. And proponents argued, rather persuasively, some would suggest, that this is a system of education. It's not a courtroom. It's not the civil courts. It's not the criminal courts. Persons on campus should have a right to a quick remedy, one that's fair and impartial, but that's quick and need not have all the trappings of a criminal case or a civil case. Nevertheless, there are serious consequences for people who are accused of sexual violence or gender discrimination than are students or professors or staff or workers. Serious consequences. So the courts have been trending towards requiring that there be lawyers once in a while, that there be cross-examination. Well, when the Trump administration came into power, the Department of Education issued a call for new guidelines. I call it a call for new guidelines. They published it and they said, listen, we think these rules ought to change. And they published them. And they actually did follow correctly the Administrative Procedures Act, which the Obama administration didn't follow. It's not a comment on the wisdom of the Dear Colleague letter, just the legality of it. So the Trump administration issued these potential new guidelines. There was public comment for 2 years, and they're operative on August 14th, 2 days from now. The major changes are, and it's subject to controversy, no doubt about it. Some argue it has a chilling effect on people who may be victimized on campus to come forward, especially since a big reason that a lot of students don't go to the criminal courts is the process is too rigorous. Its design is for something else. It's for punitive aspects and punishment, where these kids just want to feel safe. So the argument is it should be simple. It shouldn't be complicated, and it shouldn't have the trappings of a criminal or a civil case. Nevertheless, the rules now require that there be cross-examination, that the students on both sides, the accused and the complainant, both have access to an advisor, which is almost always going to be a lawyer, and that's going to change the dynamic significantly. That the person who investigates it can't be the same person who makes the decision. And among lawyers, that's hard to understand how that could ever be. So, but that's the way it's been, that the person who investigates it, and the concern is neutrality and objectivity. It's hard to be objective when you're the judge and the jury and that kind of thing. That's changed. You can't be both. There has to be published training. You have to have specialized training. It has to be published on the website of the school. So there's a lot of different attributes here. One thing to be mindful of is, while this takes place in 2 days, you have to start it abiding by this in 2 days. There are cases throughout the district courts of the United States, in Maryland, in New York, and in Michigan, where in the district courts, the argument is for a restraining order or a temporary restraining order or restraints. And what that means, if they prevail, then the new regulations from the Department of Education will be frozen. They will not be operative until the courts figure this out. The question is, are they going to issue those restraints? Lawyers are all over the place on whether that's going to happen. But candidate Biden has said he's going to roll them back. I wouldn't count on either of those things. They have to start on August 14th. And on August 14th, The investigations won't change that much. One of the questions that was proffered was, what's going to be the impact? The short-term impact, I think you're going to do your investigation the same way. You got to have a different entity or person to adjudicate it, but the investigations will be the same. But eventually a student's going to object. Then you have to have all that due process stuff, and it's complicated and involved and expensive. And some schools and institutions have one person, and some have a more robust community of professionals who deal with this. So what happens in the future?
We'll have to see.
There.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. I know it's detailed and nuanced, so people may not understand the details of it, but that was helpful. Saimaza, tell us a little bit about our concerns, and of course I'm a activist and a supporter of survivors as well, but I'll let you have the honors of sharing. What are some of our concerns about the impact of this change?
So, I mean, to put it very simply, it's not survivor-centered. It's not survivor-centered, and it further silences survivors, in my opinion. And in talking to colleagues, that's kind of the talk around these new regulations. There is an increased level of trauma and fear, and you think about those who have a Title IX case pending, right? What is that going to look like? It's unclear how that will move forward. Again, it further silences survivors, and where they were already, and we know sexual violence is the most underreported crime. So how do we now encourage, survivors to come forward and get that? They already felt like their institutions were against them. How do we further support them? Which is why it's so crucial for spaces like the Office of Violence Prevention at Ramapo College, to exist, so that survivors know that there is a survivor-centered space for them to go to.
And I do believe in, the way that colleges and universities react to this will have everything to do with how comfortable survivors are to come forward, in the midst of this change. So, Marie, how are you doing things differently come August 14th at Ramapo to be able to address these guidelines and still create an environment, that's supportive for your survivors on campus?
Thank you. Even before that, just to reiterate that, these regs were dropped May 6th, 5th, in the middle of a pandemic, right? So it came right after Sexual Assault Awareness Month, when we were doing all these sexual assault awareness program and supporting survivors and things of that nature, which we always do, but we had a centralized programming for Sexual Assault Awareness Month then, that healingSPACE and Summer Experience was great and helped with that. So just think about it. You left that, and then May 5th or 6th come, and you get these regs drop. So you go from a administrative standpoint, you go from all this advocating work, right? And then now you have to go into the mode of, we have to work on a sexual misconduct policy right away, right away, in the midst of supporting students who are going through issues with COVID, going through issues with isolation, going through all these issues that we should be focusing on with our students. So just think of that. And then, we had to hurry up and create a committee to address these guidelines, right? So even before we get on campus, it's already impacting the way we do things. Another example is it's also federally mandated that all students have primary prevention education before they even step on college campuses. So we have these modules that we give out to students, we send out to students. They usually go out August 1st. But I had to prolong that to August 17th because I didn't want I wanted the company that we use to update their policies and update the questions and update the surveys. So now students they would have had a month to fulfill it. Now they have about 10 days to do that. So even before we get on campus and get back to the work that we have to do, it's impacting students. And to piggyback on what Simaza was saying, students are victims or survivors are being silenced for the most, or at the very least, will feel intimidated by the process even more. It was already an intimidating process. One of the things that I pride myself as doing as an advocate for these victims and an educator is to be able to go through our sexual misconduct policy and say, see, we're here to support you. We're here to support you no matter where you are in this journey. We're here to support you. The school is here to support you. I have to find better ways to incorporate some of these new regs, to talk about, now you have the choice of preponderance of the evidence and clear and convincing. And although Ramapo still will use preponderance of the evidence, but not all schools are going to go that route. So the education is going to be augmented. It's going to need to take some time, and remotely doing that poses another challenge.
Well, I can imagine. I can imagine it was a lot in the midst of everything else, all the other challenges for colleges and universities. Just to let our viewers know, again, thanks to a very generous grant and ongoing support from the New Jersey Bar Association and the IOLTA Fund at the Bar Foundation, we at the YWCA of Northern New Jersey's healingSPACE have been able to provide Title IX training and support to all the colleges and universities here in New Jersey. This past year, we actually widened that to the entire state. The first year, we were providing it just to Bergen County. And Joseph Del Russo and his colleagues at Forensic Risk Management Group have been key in helping us educate our higher education institutions on the nuances and as well as these coming changes. Grateful to them. The funding has continued, and this November and again this spring, we will continue on with now focusing on these changes and the impact that they're having and ways that we can support our colleges and universities in better supporting survivors and understanding these regulations as they shift and change and get into practice, because that will obviously raise more issues once they're in motion, and we will work together to help navigate them. So again, grateful to the fund and to Forensic Risk Management Group for working so closely with us on this issue, which we are ongoing committed to. So as we wrap up, folks, this has been such a great discussion. Grateful to all of you for sharing your experience. Mary, I like to always end these conversations with a little inspiration. So for parents and students that are getting ready to embark and join you on campus very shortly, it sounds like the ticker's going. They're arriving, whether it's virtually or in person, shortly. What are some comments and thoughts for you to share with them about being safe on campus and what's available for them for support?
Well, first of all, Ramapo, like a lot of colleges in New Jersey and across the country, are going to this hybrid model, right? So we'll have no more than 1,000 students physically in residence hall this at least this semester, and everything else will be remote. Students will be remote. But we do acknowledge that just because you're not on campus does not mean that you're completely safe from being victimized. Of course not. Many of the cases that I've heard over the years happened, actually the majority of them happened off campus. So to parents and to students, please, the way you can feel safe or make sure that you're safe is, talk to folks, reach out to places like healingSPACE and the Office of Violence Prevention, to our Title IX office when you have a question. Public safety is still there for you, so we still have a robust public safety program with a new director. We're here to support you. Just because you're not physically here does not mean you're not here. You're here. I will be going back on campus 3 days a week for 6 days out of the month, starting August 31st. A lot of us have chose to come on campus that way. So we are here for you. We are thinking about you all the time. Everything we do is for you. And if parents have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to our office, our dean's office. We are all here for you.
Well, thank you so much, Marie. And just for our viewers to know, over the years, and I've been with the YW almost 10 years now, the growing and the expansive program at Ramapo has been very, very impressive. The commitment from President Mercer, all these years, and the capacity and resources that have been put in place for students and faculty on campus have been impressive. And just last, I feel like it was one of the last things we all did together. We had a ribbon cutting and put a healingSPACE office right on campus at Ramapo for students to come get counseling right there and have very strong prevention initiatives. We will get back to that again someday for sure. But we are grateful for the partnership, and you definitely have a wonderful example that you've put in place. Like every school, you've had your challenges, but you've put in place very strong resources, for your campus community, and we're grateful. So Saimaza, as we know in our work at healingSPACE, Ramapo is just one of the wonderful partners that we have. We are closely connected to every institution of higher education, in Bergen County. So what are some parting thoughts for you about our services at healingSPACE and, comments, for survivors about this time?
Yeah, so, healingSPACE is proud to serve the various higher education institutions in Bergen County. We have a particularly closer working relationship with Ramapo College, Bergen Community College, and Felician. However, we do support all of the higher education institutions in Bergen County, from orientation, prevention and education efforts, on-site training for faculty, staff, students, to response and supportive counseling efforts. Even in a hybrid model, we are still here. We are still working. Our hotline is fully staffed, taking calls and supporting survivors. And our hotline number is 1-800-487-2227.
Thank you so much. And we do encourage everyone to reach out to our, skilled and expert staff at healingSPACE. Saimaza leads a team of amazing professionals, and we are all here to serve you. So, from our legal eagle, tell us a little bit about, your thoughts, some inspiration for parents and students as they're getting ready to launch their school year. Mr. Del Russo.
Well, I wish I had the answers about what the future holds. At Montclair State, we've done what Mary was suggesting at Ramapo, I guess. We were looking at a hybrid process, some on campus, some mixed learning. But we'll see whether that even takes off. I mean, the situation, as we all know, is very dynamic. It's very day to day. And, what we think is going to happen tomorrow, something different occurs. So, I'm encouraged by the fact that in New Jersey, so far, things seem to be moving in the right direction. And hopefully that continues. And hopefully, the children will be back in school, that there'll be enough daycare provided so parents have a little relief and they can, get back to work or get back to caring for others and those kinds of things. I like to look at it positively. I think, our politicians and our legislators, they've tried their best. I think that some of the things I might do differently, but I think in New Jersey and in New York and the Northeast, I'd like to think that we're doing a good job and we're moving in the right direction. And I'm looking forward to a positive outcome. Hopefully, I can't look at it any other way. So keep plugged in, keep paying attention, and keep watching these Facebook Lives. Hopefully, there'll be more information moving forward about how we can protect women, children, and others.
Well, that's a great segue to, we hope that you all can join us tomorrow on YWTV. I'm very happy tomorrow to be continuing our Share the Mic Now platform, where we are sharing our YWTV Instagram and Facebook social media accounts with Black women in our community to help amplify their voices. And tomorrow we have Tiffany Kerr joining us from Chic Situations, and very excited to speak with her and for you to learn about her life experience and the work that she's doing in our community. I'm so grateful to Saimaza and Marie and Joe for taking this time today to help educate all of us on these important issues. For those of you watching, if you're suddenly realize that there was someone in your life who has a child getting ready to go to college for the first time in a few weeks, and it would have been great for them to see this broadcast, do not despair. This lives on our Facebook page and you can share it with them. We do encourage you to share this message and get it out to the community. We, again, are encouraging you to follow healingSPACE. YWCA Northern New Jersey's healingSPACE has its own Facebook page if you're interested in staying connected to issues related to our work and sexual violence prevention and survivor support. Please like that page. Ramapo's College Office of Violence Prevention has its own social media pages. We encourage you to follow them as well and learn about the great work that they're doing. Even if you don't have a student there, you will be very impressed with the activities that they have planned. Marie is a wonderful partner, and we're so grateful that we have her in our community doing this work wherever she is, and glad that she's in Ramapo. So for the rest of you, stay well. We are grateful for this time with you, and we look forward to spending more with you tomorrow. Be well, everyone, and thank you so much to our speakers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.